Welcome to Tech Talk Live, a rundown of technical ideas and topics to help improve your knowledge of all things Comrex and general tech in the world of broadcast and content creation. Here's your host, Chris Crump.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode number 5 of Tech Talk Live. I'm Chris, and everybody here at Comrex. We're glad that you could be here with us. We're streaming live today on our Comrex pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where you can send us questions and comments to be read live on the air, so please feel free to do so. We've been getting a lot of questions from our customers about how to control signals to and from the studio with our products. So today we're going to review some things about contact closures. We're also going to have a chat with our very good friend, Alex Hartman, with something called MQTT, which I'm fascinated by, and I think you will be too. And in our Nerd Alert segment, I'm going to discuss a very common annoyance for many of us headphone wearers and offer a very cool solution. But hey, to start things off, why don't we ask a techie?
Welcome to Tech Talk Live, a rundown of
except I should probably play this one first. Okay, there we go. Yeah. All day long, Comrex techies are helping our customers solve a variety of issues that come up out in the field, and techies want to make sure that our customers get the most out of their Comrex products. So with the upcoming election, followed closely by the fall sports season, we're getting a lot of calls about ensuring the reliability of live transmissions using our LiveShot IP video codec. Techie Paul Santolo is here to give us some tips about how we can make that happen. Good morning, Paul. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Good to see you, Chris.
Better to see you. How are things up there in Massachusetts? It doesn't look too depressing and gray today. It looks really kind of nice.
No, we're a little bit off the norm. Yeah, it's been kind of sunny lately. We've been seeing the weather warm up a little bit. So yeah, things are looking up for the summertime.
Really cool. So one of the things that I know that you get a lot of questions about, I have been recently as well. We've got two big things coming up, like I mentioned. We have the elections coming up, first of all, and the Democratic National Convention in Chicago and the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. We have a lot of customers that are doing live broadcasts, whether it's on our Access IP audio codecs or our LiveShot video codecs. I was kind of hoping you could kind of fill us in on some things that we should know. First of all, about how to make these things more reliable during a live sports broadcast.
Sure. So a good thing to understand is some of the profiles that are embedded into the system by default. So a lot of people will use these profiles that set the quality and sort of the timing for your transmission by, in an automatic capacity. But if you're dealing with a sports type of transmission, it is certainly good to understand what kind of levels you might need to alter in the respect of increasing your bit rate. So if you understand how the LiveShot operates, it uses an encoder, and it's very much source driven. So if there's not a lot of movement, there's not going to be a lot of update for the pixels in the background. So to accommodate for a lot of pixel, what we call refresh, you want to make sure you have an adequate amount of bit rate. So what we can do is typically recommend to go with a higher than normal amount of bit rate. So for instance, if you're going to do, say, like a 1080 res, we recommend a sweet spot of 6 megabit to 7 megabit per second for a typical news type of application. But in sports, I would recommend updating that to at least 7. That way you'll be able to capture the motion a little bit more effectively and not lose any detail, especially when things are moving very fast, when you're doing camera cuts, panning, that sort of thing.
Well, I know a lot of people depend on cellular at these events. We usually try to dissuade people, especially if you're in a fixed location away from cellular, if you can avoid it, a wired broadband connection, and maybe even a wired broadband connection in conjunction with a couple of cellular connections. Any thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so really when you're looking at ideal conditions, it would be very hard pressed to actually upload an adequate amount of bit rate for one single modem. So we typically recommend to go with at least 2, especially when you're dealing with the high definition resolutions. Another thing that we sometimes recommend is to actually alternate your cell carrier. So if you have 2 modems and you have one that's Verizon, you have maybe one that's AT&T, for instance, it's a good balance, because if you're in a side of town that maybe doesn't have as good of signal for AT&T or vice versa, the system will be able to adequately balance on the fly in the background for where the bit or where the data needs to be sent to over that particular link. That way your photog can certainly do what they need to. They don't have to kind of hover and try to second guess an adverse network condition.
I would say one of probably the most powerful things about our audio codecs and our video codecs are the profiles, because the profiles are kind of like the secret sauce, the things that basically make the codecs work. And modifying a profile is something that a lot of people don't think about, but you can really tweak these things to work in really specific conditions. I know we've talked about maybe a specific profile access, at Comrex LiveShot, for example.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, Chris. What I would, and I'm going to bring one up here in just a moment to kind of give you a visual, but just to give you an understanding, there are lots of different settings that can be applied. You are absolutely correct. There are some that we would typically recommend that maybe some of your, maybe the novice users start off with, and I'm going to show that you can make a copy of one and edit the particular settings that are going to be more of the top hits. But if you really need to needle down or drill down into some of the more advanced settings, we have that ability when you get into like GOP structures and frames, that sort of thing. It can get a little pretty in-depth, but depending on your application, you might need something like that. And we've made the LiveShot to be extremely versatile. And this is where some of, as you say, the secret sauce shines. So let me bring up, I'm sorry, you're going to say something, Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to say, luckily we only have a 30-minute show, so we're not going to get too in-depth.
That's right. Okay, so let me present here. I'm going to bring up a screen on my side.
Do I need to do some incidental music while we're waiting?
No, I think you should have it up there.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So as you can see, we have our typical LiveShot interface. We've got our entries. There are 4 standard entries. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our HD entry here. Okay. And I'm actually going to bring up the edit screen. And you'll see that the default profile here for an HD connection is 6 megabits per second. I'm actually going to change that to a profile that I've already created. It's down here at the bottom of the list. I've created a 7 megabit profile. I'm going to apply that. And now we have this 7 megabit profile, and that would be more conducive for establishing connection for a sports-oriented connection. Now, I will say also that I don't know if you've noticed this, Chris, but you might notice that the interface looks a little different towards somebody who might be more familiar with LiveShot.
Well, I'm pretty sure that most of our users that are using LiveShot are going, that doesn't look like the same interface. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about this new version of firmware and when it's going to be released.
That's right. So this is our new firmware, and it's, as you can see, it's an HTML5 kind of based interface. You just put in the IP address for your system, and you log directly into the interface of the device. And this will allow you to, in a very similar fashion to our audio codecs, the interface is a little similar kind of footprint, if you will. But you'll notice that it's going to be a little easier to navigate through some of these different tabs or sections of the interface, such as your dashboard for your overall performance. Just from a first glance, you'll be able to see audio as well. So that's kind of some interesting, good stuff coming down the pike. Performance is going to be a little bit more in depth. I don't have a connection right now, but you get the idea. And over here,
nice
we have our profiles, that 7 megabit that I was mentioning. Yeah, exactly. So you can see that I can change the bit rate, different lines, that sort of a thing. And certainly there are other aspects that you can get into, such as our advanced settings, as I mentioned earlier. We're not going to get too far into those right now, but we're hoping to release this later this year. I don't have a particular ETA on it. We're just working out some other aspects of it to make sure that people will be able to utilize it directly or through our switchboard server to be able to remotely connect to your device from wherever you are.
Well, the new interface looks great, and it's for those of you who are Also, Access NX Portable users or Access NX Rack or multi-rack users, it does look familiar, and it's using that HTML5 interface. I'll also say that we do a lot of exhaustive testing to make sure that there's compatibility between firmware versions before we release a firmware. So we'll definitely make a lot of noise once this is available, and I'm sure all of our LiveShot users are going to look forward to it. Hey, Paul,
Absolutely, Chris.
Giving us some tips today on using LiveShot for sports coverage and also for conventions. Of course, if anybody has any questions, you can get a hold of Techies at the email address techies@comrex.com. You can also call our toll-free number, 800-237-1776 in the North America, or 978. What is it, Paul? 237-1776. Does that sound right?
And that is correct. That is absolutely correct. Yes.
All of our techies are always happy to talk to you. And Paul, we're very happy to talk to you today. And thanks for joining us on Tech Talk Live.
Much appreciated, Chris. Thank you.
So we like to do a little feature focus. And one of the most common questions that we get from Comrex users these days is about signaling and remote control using our products. Most of our products have, most of our hardware products, that is, have the ability to pass both serial data and contact closures, or one or the other, both of which provide a common interface for passing and signaling data from end to end. To give you an example, we just talked about our LiveShot IP video codec. It does have a remote jack. It has RS-232 data, so you could actually set up tally lights or switching control through this little port on the portable unit from the rack mount in the studio. Another product that we have is our Opal. Not really a codec, it's basically a WebRTC server interface for basically making calls from a web browser into this device. You've got your analog audio in and out, also AES3 in and out. But you also have contact closures and serial data as well. I actually use the contact closures in my studio here to signal whether someone has called in on line 1 or line 2, and it'll light one of my 4 lit lights that I have from YellowTech. It's a great little setup, pretty easy to create. Also, if you're a BRIC-Link user, you probably know that here's our BRIC-Link 2, very common product out there in the field. We got lots of them out there. Contact closures, serial data as well. If it looks very much like the Opal, it's not a coincidence. Basically, it's the same form factor that you'll see also on our VH2. Oh, I have this wired in for some reason. On our VH2, it's going to be very much the same way. One of the things that we do offer is a nice little cable. It's a DB9 to, it's a mini DIN 9 to DB9. So you can use that to maybe connect to a little bank of relays. So you can control lights or have it connect to a console or something like that. So there are a lot of ways that you can utilize our products and our Comrex mini DIN 9 to DB9 cable, and also a serial data cable that you can get from your favorite Comrex supplier to basically create signaling and so forth. One example that I would give you is there's a minor league baseball team here in Gwinnett County where I live in Georgia. It's the Gwinnett Stripers. And they have an FM broadcast that they do of the games, and it's a unattended station. So when the announcer goes out to do the game, wherever he's at in the United States, he will take his Access Portable out there, and he has a little button box that he connects into his Access Portable that will send contact closures to the Access rack mount back in the studio and actually switch the live FM feed over to the game feed. So he can do the game, do all of his actualities and all of his billboards and all of his music, and do the entire game announcement from his laptop using his Access Portable back to the studio. And when he's done, he actually will just hit one of the contact closure buttons from his Access Portable and switch back to the FM feed. So it's a great little setup, and if you have any questions about it, all of this information is in our manuals that you can find online, and you can also contact us at Comrex, 800-237-1776, or go to our website at comrex.com. If you've spent any time in trade shows around the world, you've probably bumped into our next guest, who is on the vendor side as well of the broadcast business, as well as on the broadcaster side. Alex Hartman with Wisconsin Public Radio. Welcome to Tech Talk Live. I hope you're doing well today.
I'm doing good, Chris. How you doing?
I'm excited. I'm excited because it's approaching summertime. And
It is.
And golf. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we all know what that really means.
I love it. Yeah. It's something that those of us who are frustrated with many things in our lives do just to make ourselves even more frustrated.
Here in the Midwest, we've gone from golf to axe throwing. So.
Oh, right. And
yeah,
drinking along with it, which is actually a great idea.
They're one and the same, I think. It's just one's more expensive than the other. So.
I'm kind of curious what the stats are on incidents that occur at an axe throwing bar. There's got to be somebody keeping stats on that, I would hope.
I'm sure a university got paid to do something somewhere and is studying it as we speak.
Very nice.
We'll find out in a couple of years.
So Alex, I appreciate you joining us today. And, kind of one of the things that we were talking about yesterday kind of segues in from contact closures on our products to something you've been working on. I'm really curious about this thing that you introduced me to yesterday called MQTT.
Yes.
And in my research, I found out that it stands for message queuing transport technology, but if
telemetry transport.
MQTT, okay, right.
Yep. Message queuing, telemetry transport.
But according to MQTT.org, it doesn't stand for anything. Kind of like
right.
HD radio doesn't stand for
right.
anything.
Yeah, it's a brand, not an acronym. They kind of created an acronym. It was developed for the oil and gas industry to talk to pipeline wellheads all along, where they do that stuff, getting, tank floats, temperatures, so on and so forth. But here's the exact description I found that was the best way. MQTT stands for Message Queuing Telemetry Transport. It is a lightweight messaging protocol for use in cases where clients need small code footprint, sounds familiar, and are connected to unreliable networks or networks with limited bandwidth resources. Again, sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So the shoe fits, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody knows SNMP. I worked in ISP, Internet Service Provider industry in the 90s. We were trying to get rid of SNMP in 1997, to give you any idea of how broadcast just came along and said, hey, in 2009, let's use that. IT had already thrown it away. So,
well, one of the biggest reasons is you have to maintain all those MIBs. You have to cram them into the hardware, right. And you have to constantly update them every time you.
From a vendor's perspective, it is a nightmare to maintain. From an end user perspective, it's a nightmare to maintain. So MQTT actually goes the other way, where it is more of a push protocol instead of a pull protocol. The device tells a broker what things it has available to monitor or switch, its status, and if I go offline, here's what I want you to do, or if I come online, here's what I want you to do. So you're just listening for all these messages, and then you can also send, and they call it topics. You can subscribe to a topic and then set certain things, like say a light switch, for instance, or an on-air light relay, or a contact closure. Imagine that, from an automation system, or a satellite receiver. So I've started dabbling in that little world and come up with some adapters that do just that with MQTT.
Oh, cool. I noticed that there are some RJ45 connectors on there.
There are. They are not Ethernet. There's only one Ethernet on the main brain board here. This guy is actual network. Right. These are actual bus, just good old-fashioned serial bus, specific for machine integrity. Very low speed because, again, it's a lightweight message. It is light switch 1 off. That's literally the text string. So it's very, very small, very, very lightweight.
We know that you're a broadcast integration specialist at Wisconsin Public Radio. You're also a partner with a company that we're familiar with called Optimized Media Group.
Yep.
which is a systems integrator, which is cool.
Yep.
And you've got experience on the vendor side, and I was excited when you were showing me some of these little widgets and gadgets that you've got in the, what do you call it, the
It's the Model
42
42.
domain.
It's the Babelfish for those
Very nice.
fans of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Excellent. So in a perfect world, how could I use this with maybe like a BRIC-Link 3, for example?
So again, the BRIC-Link 3, let's use your sports example there. It's a perfect example. And you've got an older analog studio where you need to switch, your switcher, for instance. You got an old broadcast tools or something like that needs a physical input or a GPI to switch. Well, I can use this relay board to interface to it through this brain board, or I can send it an IP message through the internet using a VPN or some other technology, however you get from inside to outside, and trigger the lights, for instance, or the Axia relays that we have, any number of things. Or you could take a satellite closure from that as well and say, here's my local break, but it's coming from my BRIC-Link 3 because I have a remote studio. Very common for that use case nowadays. A lot of guys doing their shows from home.
Well, and it's kind of neat that you're coming up with those little widgets and gadgets because not everybody has access to, like a high dollar soldering station or an engineer that knows how to do it.
Right.
Some of us are. Sorry, I just dropped my little relay board. It's amazing what you can get on Amazon, but there's still some work that has to be done on it. I think what you're doing
I know.
Makes it.
Here's the single version.
Yeah. I think what you're doing makes it even easier for like small mom and pop stations.
Very
with
much
a little
so.
bit of help to plug in and make these things work.
Well, my number one time suck is sitting there with a soldering iron and that DB9 connector to go into a DB15 or an RJ45 and coming up with the adapter and then going, crap, I screwed it up, and then starting over because that pin is reversed based on the schematic and so on and so forth. And you're tired usually when you're installing these things because it's the last part of it. And GPIO has always been a little bit of a mystery because there is no standard to it. Everybody kind of gets to write their own. So with the prevalence of more computer-oriented engineers coming into the marketplace versus the guys who know how to use a soldering iron, this is all config file. So you just plug it in, and I'm going to make input 8 do this. It's an output, not an input, and this is going to receive this, and it's going to follow that. It's a config file. And if you get it wrong, erase the config file, start over. You lost 5 minutes versus 5 hours.
And to be able to control and manage all of this, I think the amazing thing is that there are a couple of applications you can get online for free, right? Yep.
Most of the stuff I deal with, I try to go to the open source route, which is free as in beer, as they lovingly say, where, it's open source community. So if you want to write a module, if something doesn't exist for it, you write your own and submit it to the project, and they either put it in mainline or it becomes a singleton, whatever. So these things all talk that open source language. MQTT is a protocol like SNMP. It's ratified by the IEEE and everybody else, and IETF. So this is out there for everybody and anybody to use. It's very common to find it in like home automation. And like I was saying yesterday, Chris, the difference between home automation and industrial automation is really just the interface and the price tag. It's the same stuff that the guys at the HVAC companies are using. It's, Modbus, which a lot of vendors know about. High-speed serial protocol, essentially. You can do it too. The difference between home and industrial these days is a price tag and a support number. So
and the word and
the word,
I guess.
Yep. Right. And this is, keep in mind, MQTT is running locally on your network. There is no cloud. There is no subscription. Everything runs on a little board like this sitting in the TOC. Plugged into your network.
Well, yeah, when I go into my router here at home, I see all of my Nest thermostats. I see every smartphone. I see every television. I see every appliance, even your stove these days, and my refrigerator has a.
My dishwasher, washer, and dryer have the same thing. Yep. So
the crazy thing is,
someone has written that module. Yeah, someone has written a module for my dishwasher, for instance. And my dishwasher now has a hook into my home automation system to ding a light, blink a light over here, ding a doorbell. My office is in a basement underneath my garage. I can't hear a whole lot. It's a concrete bunker. So my lights flicker now. I make them blink when the doorbell is pushed. You know, those are what's different about that than what you're doing at a transmitter site or a studio when you're doing a remote broadcast, for instance. You need some kind of visual indicator.
So with
Model 42,
your Babelfish,
yep,
that actually becomes a module that could be controlled with the MQTT interface,
yep,
which
correct.
I think you can download it for free from the mqtt.org website. Is that the place where you get it?
They tell you about it. Look for a program called Mosquito, which is the actual broker. And then you can use a program called MQTT Explorer, another free program that's out there. It's much like the iReasoning MIB browser, but this is for MQTT. So you have to have a broker to use it, and you have to have some kind of browser to see what's on your network. It's very, very, very simplistic in its nature. It's very self-descripting. That's the beauty of it. Versus SNMP is that it is self-descripting. So the device tells you what it has available, not a MIB file that you have to constantly update. So the firmware is like, hey, I added a feature. We're going to allow you to expose that RS-232, for instance, on the LiveShot. Well, now I can pull that metadata into my network over that serial or send to it over the network without having some other third-party intermediary that may or may not work.
So I guess a lot of people are going, this seems pretty cool. Where do I get these little, where do I get Babelfish, the Model 42, and, you know, the other little gadgets and gadgets?
Sure. Reach out to us at info@optimizemedia.net, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it. We're still in the development kind of phase with it. Just, you know, it solved a need I had and thought I can't be the only person with this problem. A good friend of mine literally runs his whole house. He has 350 light bulbs that all talk MQTT, and they're all using this same protocol. So it's very robust. You can have a lot of devices on it. I've developed boards specifically for the Pico digital satellite receivers, the Wegener satellite receivers. They're one and the same. For GPIO, you just tell it which mode it's in, and it knows how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. I have one for WheatNet to configure with WheatNet blades. I have one for Axia as well for their GPIO ports. And we also have of all the things I never thought I needed to know was how to make a CD player start from a button in 2024. CD players now don't have any GPIO on them at all, except for an infrared remote. So I take GPI from your console and spit out an IR command. Something I didn't know I needed.
The 90s if you need it.
Right, exactly. You know, they took away all the useful stuff and started charging more. I don't know how that worked, but that's how it worked. So yeah, reach out to us. We'll be happy to talk about it all if you need to know about it.
Alex, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. I mean, I know you're always kind of going for Wisconsin Public Radio and Optimize Media stuff and everything else you do. So thanks for joining us today on Tech Talk Live. We humbly appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.
See you down the road. As if that wasn't nerdy enough, I suppose this is less of a nerd alert and kind of more of a public service announcement that is the product of one of my biggest annoyances as a former on-air jock and creative services director, always having to wear headphones. And okay, it's also a bit nerdy, but headphones can be really annoying to wear for long periods of time, especially if you got like the Sony MDR 7506s like I'm wearing now. The earpieces are plastic, and over time, everybody's had this issue where the plastic starts to flake and it sticks to the side of your head, and you get too sweaty, and it's really, really horrible. And you do have to replace these. So you order up another pair, and after maybe a year or even less, and if you have to wear them for 6 hours, they just become impossible. I actually had just purchased a pair, and they sat for about a year. I replaced them, and within 6 hours, they were already flaking. So these aren't cheap, but they're not expensive either. I have found, a little dry in here, I found a place where you can get these really cool lambskin or leather ear pads to replace almost any headphone that you can imagine. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly or not, but it's DeCaniAudio.com. Yeah, there it is. So DeCaniAudio.com. You can look up your headphone model and find the ear pad that you like. And if you're, I don't know, a supporter of PETA and you don't want to support, animal skin type ear pads, I think they have some natural product as well. But they're really high quality. They're not cheap. I think I paid $60 for this pair of ear pads, but to tell you the truth, they're very comfortable. My ears don't sweat, and I don't get that annoying flaking when I take my headphones off. So check out DeCaniAudio.com. Well, that pretty much does it for our Tech Talk Live for today. Our next Tech Talk Live is going to be sometime in June. And if we can figure out our complicated vacation calendars, we'll let you know when that's going to be. So be sure to check out our social media platforms for updates on the date, our guests and our topics. We'll make sure that it's something good. I have a buddy that his wife competed in the World Barista competition in Seoul recently. Well, we might talk about coffee next time. That might be cool. If you're in the New York, Long Island area on June 7th, you can still register for the Talkers Conference at Hofstra University. It's a really good and informative conference. Commerce will be there. We'll have some of our products. You can go to talkers.com for details, and we'll see you there. So special thanks to Paul from Comrex, from our techies, for taking time to talk to us about LiveShot. Alex from Wisconsin Public Radio and Optimized Media Group. Grace and Julia from Comrex, thank you very much for all of your help with Tech Talk Live in the background. And a big special shout out to my friend Dirk Freeman Jr. from Steelboy for his technical assistance. Most of all, thank you for joining us today on Tech Talk Live, and we will see you next month.
Thanks for joining us on Tech Talk Live. If you have a topic you'd like to hear more about or a question for Ask a Techie, send it to ttl@comrex.com. And be sure to visit comrex.com for more information on Comrex products and services.